I didn't realize I was falling in love until August, when the cicadas started their nightly chorus and Marcus stopped showing up at the library. That's when I understood that somewhere between June and the dog days of summer, those walks home had become the most important part of my day. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, back when I thought he was just being nice. It was the first week of June when I got the internship at the university library. I was 22, fresh out of college, and this was supposed to be my stepping stone into a real career in archival work. The position was perfect, except for one thing. The building closed at 10 p.m., and I lived 40 minutes away on foot. My car had died that spring, and I was too broke to fix it. The bus stopped running at 9, so I walked every night through neighborhoods that got progressively quieter and darker the closer I got to my apartment. Marcus worked at the circulation desk. I noticed him my first day, mostly because he had this way of stamping books that seemed almost meditative, like each thump of the date stamp was part of some private rhythm only he could hear. He was tall, with dark hair that always looked slightly disheveled, and he wore these vintage band t-shirts under his cardigan that made him look like he'd stepped out of a different decade. We didn't talk much at first, just the usual pleasantries. Have a good night. See you tomorrow. That kind of thing. The first time he walked me home, I didn't even realize what was happening. It was my third night. I'd stayed late organizing a collection of letters from the 1930s, and when I finally left, he was standing outside the library doors, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking at his phone. I assumed he was waiting for a ride, but when I started walking, he fell into step beside me. "You head this way too?" he asked, casual, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, I'm over on Maple Street. You?" "Close enough," he said, which I later learned was a complete lie. He lived in the opposite direction. We walked in comfortable silence for a while. The night was warm, and the street lamps cast everything in this orange glow that made the whole city feel suspended in amber. Then he started talking about the letters I'd been cataloging, asking questions that showed he'd actually been paying attention when I'd mentioned them earlier. He had this way of listening, really listening, where his whole body seemed to lean slightly toward you, like your words were the only thing that mattered in that moment. When we reached my building, a shabby 3-story walk-up with a broken intercom, he smiled and said, "See you tomorrow." Then he turned and walked back the way we'd come, hands in his pockets, whistling something I couldn't quite place. The next night, the same thing happened, and the night after that. By the end of the first week, I stopped being surprised to see him waiting outside the library. I started looking forward to it, actually. Those walks became this pocket of time that existed outside the normal flow of my day. We talked about everything. Books, obviously. Music. The weird dreams we'd had as kids. His theory that every city has a specific smell that you only notice when you've been away for a while. My embarrassing obsession with documentaries about abandoned places. "There's something beautiful about spaces that used to be full of people," I told him one night as we passed a closed-down diner, its windows papered over with faded permits. Like all those conversations and moments just soaked into the walls somehow. He looked at the building for a long moment. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I think places remember us, even after we're gone." It was mid-June when I first noticed he was taking the long way. We'd established a route that first week, the most direct path from the library to my apartment. But one night, instead of turning left on 5th Street like we usually did, Marcus kept walking straight. "Isn't this out of the way?" I asked. "There's a garden a few blocks over," he said. "Thought you might want to see it. They leave the gates open at night." The garden was small, tucked behind a church, with roses that glowed almost white in the darkness. The air was thick with their scent. We sat on a bench for 20 minutes, not talking much, just existing in that space together. I remember thinking how strange it was that silence with another person could feel so full instead of empty. After that, the direct route became a suggestion rather than a rule. Some nights, we'd detour through the park to see if the food trucks were still out. Other nights, we'd walk along the river, watching the reflection of lights shimmer on the water. A couple of times, we stopped at this 24-hour bookstore that smelled like coffee and old paper, and we'd browse the shelves, pulling out random volumes and reading passages to each other. "Listen to this," Marcus said one night, holding up a book of poetry I'd never heard of. He read a line about longing being a city you carry inside yourself, and the way his voice wrapped around those words made something in my chest ache. I started staying later at the library, even when my work was done. I'd reorganize shelves that didn't need organizing, or I'd sit in the back room pretending to catalog items while really just watching the clock, waiting for 10. My roommate, Tyler, noticed. "You're never home anymore," he said one morning over cereal. "This internship's really got you hooked, huh?" I mumbled something about being dedicated, but the truth was I wasn't thinking about the internship at all. I was thinking about the way Marcus's eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way he always walked on the street side of the sidewalk, like he was shielding me from traffic. How he'd remembered that I liked black coffee and showed up one night with an extra cup, still hot, from the cafe near his place. July arrived with a heat wave, the kind where the air feels solid, where even breathing takes effort. The walks became slower, more languid. We'd stop more often, sitting on stoops or leaning against cool brick walls, trying to catch any hint of a breeze. Marcus started wearing these thin linen shirts that clung to his shoulders when he sweated, and I had to actively stop myself from staring. One particularly brutal night, we ended up at a fountain in a neighborhood I'd never been to before. Without discussing it, we both sat on the edge and took off our shoes, dipping our feet in the water. It was technically probably illegal, but the streets were empty, and the cold water felt like salvation. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said, staring at the ripples our feet made. "Sure." "Why do you always look surprised when I'm waiting for you, after the library closes?" I didn't know how to answer that, because I couldn't believe someone would go this far out of their way for me, because I kept waiting for him to get bored and stop showing up, because every night I was terrified this would be the last one. "I guess I'm not used to people being this consistent," I finally said. He turned to look at me, and in the fountain's light, his eyes were impossibly dark. "You should get used to it." Something shifted that night. The walks started feeling less like friendly companionship, and more like something I didn't have a name for. Or maybe I had a name for it, but I was too scared to say it out loud, even in my own head. I'd never been good at this, at reading signals, at knowing if what I felt was reciprocated or just wishful thinking. I started testing the waters in small ways, letting my hand brush against his when we walked, laughing a little longer at his jokes, telling him things I usually kept private, like how I'd felt invisible for most of college, or how sometimes I was scared I'd never figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. "You're not invisible," he said firmly when I confessed that fear. "Trust me, I see you." The way he said it made my heart hammer against my ribs. By late July, our walks were taking almost 2 hours. My 40-minute commute had tripled, and I didn't care even a little bit. We'd wander through neighborhoods neither of us had explored, discovering all-night diners and murals painted on warehouse walls. Once we walked until we found ourselves at the edge of the city where the buildings gave way to fields, and we sat in the grass watching fireflies until almost 2 in the morning. "Don't you have to work tomorrow?" I asked him. "Yeah, don't you?" "Yeah." Neither of us moved. Tyler was convinced I was seeing someone. "You have that look," he said. "That stupid happy look people get." "I'm not seeing anyone." "But you want to be." I threw a pillow at him, but he wasn't wrong. The thing was, I couldn't figure out what Marcus wanted. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, something tender and complicated. He'd touch my shoulder when he laughed, let conversations drift into comfortable silence, share his headphones so we could listen to the same song while we walked. But he never said anything direct, never made a move that couldn't be explained away as just friendship. I was terrified of ruining it. These walks had become essential to me, like air or water. The thought of making things awkward, of losing this, was unbearable. So I stayed quiet. We both did. August came, and with it, the knowledge that my internship was ending. 3 more weeks, then 2. I should have said something. Should have asked him directly what this was, what we were doing. But every night I chickened out. We'd walk our increasingly elaborate routes, and I'd open my mouth to speak and then lose my nerve, filling the silence with some observation about the weather instead. "Summer's almost over," Marcus said one night. We were taking a route that went past the garden with the white roses, the one he'd first shown me in June. The roses were past their peak now, petals browning at the edges. "Yeah," I said. "My internship ended in 1 week." What happens after? He asked. With the internship? I'm not sure yet. I've been applying to other positions. Might have to move depending on what comes through. He was quiet for a long time. We walked 3 full blocks in silence. I'm going to miss this, he finally said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Miss what? He stopped walking. We were standing under a streetlight, moths circling above our heads. These walks, you. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest. Marcus. I know the library's in the opposite direction from my apartment, he said in a rush. I've been taking you home and then walking an extra hour back to my place every night. Have been since day one. And I know I should have said something weeks ago, but I was scared. And then it felt too late. And now you're leaving, and He ran his hand through his hair, making it stand up in wild directions. I'm saying this all wrong. You walk an hour back? I was stuck on that detail. Every night? Every night. That's 2 hours of walking, plus the time with me. You've been spending almost 3 hours walking me home. Yeah, he laughed, but it sounded shaky. I'm aware. I'm very aware of how ridiculous that is. Why? He looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was blue. Because I wanted to spend time with you. Because those walks were the best part of my day. Because somewhere around the second week of June, I realized I was completely gone for you, and I didn't know how to say it without ruining everything. The cicadas were so loud they almost drowned out my thoughts. Almost. You're not ruining anything, I said. No? No, because I've been staying late at the library on purpose, even when I have no work left, just so I wouldn't miss walking with you. His smile started slow and then took over his whole face. Yeah? Yeah, and I've been terrified this whole time that I was reading everything wrong, that maybe you were just being nice, and I was this pathetic guy developing feelings for someone who just saw me as a friend. Not just a friend, he said. Definitely not just a friend. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the exact pattern of lighter brown in his eyes, close enough that when I reached up and touched his face, my hand was steady, even though my heart was racing. I don't want to move, I said. I don't want this to end. Then don't. Move, stay. We'll figure it out. I don't have a job lined up. We'll figure it out, he repeated. I don't care. I can't let you leave without at least trying. We've spent this whole summer taking the long way home. Let's keep doing that. Let's keep taking the long way. I kissed him, right there under the streetlight with the moths circling and the cicadas screaming and the summer air thick around us. He kissed me back, his hands coming up to cut my face, and it felt like every walk, every detour, every extra hour had been leading to exactly this moment. When we finally pulled apart, we were both grinning like idiots. So, he said, should we head to your place? It's only 11, I pointed out. We've got time. The long way? Always the long way. We walked until dawn, watching the sky turn from black to purple to pink. We stopped at the fountain and the garden and the bookstore. We sat on the stoop of my building and talked about everything we'd been too scared to say all summer. And when the sun finally came up, Marcus kissed me again, gentle and unhurried, like we had all the time in the world. I didn't move away that fall. I found a job at a different library, one with normal hours. Marcus and I still walk together most nights, still take routes that make no logical sense, still stop to look at things that catch our eye. Sometimes we walk for hours. Sometimes we barely make it a block before we're too distracted by each other to keep going, but we always take the long way. It's kind of our thing now. Total_char_count, 15,847.